Is 500,000 amp good enough for me? Now, even though nothing I say is financial advice, arguably I would say yes, because if let's say amp were to go to the price of 20 cents, now at that point, of course, 500,000 amp would hypothetically be worth $100,000. Now, when I say this, right, some people, they may be thinking, okay, that's not that much. Well, the way you take a look at it is this: 100 grand in the grand scheme of things, I think that's a lot, because keep in mind, 20 cents is around a 44x from here. Now, here's the thing. If let's say out of 100 grand, I save 30 grand of that, right? So 30% of that, I save it. Let's say I save it for the next cycle. And let's say during the next cycle, this holding, this $30,000 holding, and I put into some, let's say, good project, right? Let's say at least just does a 10x. Now at that point, that 30 grand becomes 300,000. I think hypothetically that's really great. Again, that's just from saving 30% from here. Let's say in theory, if the holding were to become $100,000, not to mention if that holding 30,000 does a 20x, that's 600,000. So the way you take a look at it is that 100 grand, when people say, well, it's not that much, I disagree with that, at least in my opinion, even though I'm not telling anyone to buy amp. Not to mention as well, 100 grand, I think, is a pretty good down payment for a home, because homes are very expensive. I understand that. But even also beyond that point, the way I view it is that many people that I know out there, they're not only just holding amp. So if let's say they have 500,000 amp somewhere along in their portfolio, and let's say other projects in that portfolio do well too, let's say in the make-believe scenario, having amp, let's say, do around a 44x doesn't seem that bad. So again, I don't view this as a bad amount really in the grand scheme of things, and 20 cents is still what I believe in when it comes to amp. Now, some people, they may be wondering, okay, like why? Like what makes you think that that's even achievable, at least in theory? Now, let me explain, because the way you take a look at it is that AMP has very underrated fundamentals. It's very amazing, but sometimes people often overlook it. And also, I kind of feel like sometimes people only take a look at the price chart, but they don't understand the fundamentals. And let me explain how AMP is, basically what it's all about, in a very simple way, at least in my opinion. We have to take a look at what launched AMP in the first place. It is something called Flexa and ConsenSys. Now, Flexa is a crypto payments company, and ConsenSys, it's a blockchain development enterprise. However, of course, people usually just focused on Flexa. But even besides that point, when I take a look at this is very amazing, because shortly before AMP was launched, Flexa launched an app called SpedN. Now, what is SpedN? SpedN is an app that basically allows people to make purchases at various merchants using various cryptocurrencies. So that's very fantastic, right? Again, people can basically, in simple terms, buy things using cryptos, hypothetically using that. However, even besides that point, the reason why AMP was even launched was because the original Flexa Coin smart contract could not be upgraded to meet the new demands that Flexa was looking for. So, of course, naturally, there needs to be something better, and that is something like AMP. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, how does AMP even play a role in something like SpedN? Like, it looks cool, it sounds cool, but really, how does this even play a part? Now, let me explain, because when a purchase is made, let's say, through the SpedN app, the thing is, this merchant, right, the person who is, receiving this in exchange for selling their product, let's say, there could be a risk in this transaction. Now, the reason being is because there could, of course, always be problems, like let's say a chain halt or like a hard fork. We just don't know. So what is a way to ensure that, no matter what nonsense goes on, the merchant will still be guaranteed their payment? That is by, let's say, when this purchase is made, a certain amount of AMP that is slightly worth more than the transaction, it is temporarily locked up into a special smart contract. Now, again, what is the benefit of this? In case the transaction fails, of course, this AMP could, make up for that, transaction, right? At least in theory. Not to mention as well, some people out there seem to think that, oh yeah, what happens if there's like multiple failed transactions and it kind of ends up spiraling where there's like 1,000 failed transactions a day or whatever like that, right? Let's say there's like a problem and things go wrong. Now, to my understanding, there has never been a failed transaction, at least that I know of. So it doesn't seem like it's a big problem. And also, not to mention, let's say this app does get sold off, right? And let's say there's like multiple failed transactions a day, even if there's like 100 or 200 or whatever, the impact would be so insignificant to the point that it wouldn't affect the price of AMP by a huge amount. Because some people may be thinking, oh, if failed transactions keeps happening and they have to keep selling AMP, then what happens? Again, I've never heard of a failed transaction ever, but the way you take a look at it, even if there's, let's say, like 100 or 200, it wouldn't be enough to impact, like, the whole, I would say, vibe of AMP where it just kind of makes it just crash or whatever. I don't think it'll be like that. Because let's say someone bought a cup of coffee or whatever at Dunkin' Donuts, like $7, $8, $10, whatever, who cares, right? Let's say that failed, and then, like, let's say $11 of AMP had to be sold. That right there is not really going to affect much. This is just the example I'm using, but I'm just saying. But yeah, I'm going to move on from that. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, how does this AMP even come about? Like, where's this AMP coming from? Now, this AMP is coming from users who are staking AMP through, payment providers who are currently leveraging Flex's payment protocols. So yeah, again, this whole thing just is very amazing. And again, when people like to say, oh, 20 cents is too much to ask for, considering current circulating supply and market cap at that point would be around $17 billion, again, around a 44x from here. Why isn't 17 billion too much to ask for? I'm just going to put this out there, right? Because let's say during a fully fledged bull run, Bitcoin went to the price of around $300,000 and market cap, let's say at that point, is around 6 trillion. Let's say somewhere along there, Ethereum did very fantastic and the market cap was around 2 trillion. So just from those two projects alone, combined market cap is 8 trillion. I'm not saying including Solana, BNB, XRP. I'm not saying that, right? Just from those two projects, let's say 8 trillion in this make-believe scenario. Now keep in mind, in a trillion, that's 1,000 billion, and in a billion, that's 1,000 million. So that's a very massive amount. So are we saying that out of 8,000 billion, just from two projects, right, during a fully fledged bull run, I'm not saying next Tuesday, next Monday, I'm not saying that. During a fully fledged bull run, let's say, are we saying out of 8,000 billion, around 17 billion can't flow into this? This is just the way you take a look at it. Now, there's no guarantees, though, because the market's going to do what it's going to do. But the way you take a look at it is that this doesn't seem too far-fetched to me. And again, I can't control when the markets are going to pump. I don't know exactly because I don't have a magic crystal ball, but what I do know hypothetically is what I can control, which is just accumulating my favorite projects, holding and just waiting. That's it. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be a guarantee that it's going to do a good note, right? But then it's something I'm willing to take a chance on. So if I'm willing to take a chance on this, I might as well just believe in it and just wait for the markets to pick up because that's the only thing I can control. So anytime an income, I acquire, I hold, and I just wait. That's it. And with the way Bitcoin is heading as of right now, I wouldn't be surprised that before the end of this bull run, Bitcoin, let's say, reaches around $300,000. I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. It's going to take time, though. Maybe somewhere near along the end of this year. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm just saying, it might take quite some time. But it doesn't seem like it's too much time. And I'm going to be waiting anyways. So again, I still believe in AMP. And when people ask me, hey, is 500,000 AMP good enough for me? Well, I can't speak on anyone's behalf, but I would say yes in my perspective. And 20 cents wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. And make sure to subscribe if you gain value from this video. I greatly appreciate it. It's only the captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.